So, what happens after Muhammad dies? Of course, the big question is, and anyone who's been like in a large church or even a small church, and like something happens to the pastor and there's no plan for succession, like who comes after that, it's a big mess. This is true for businesses, it's true for churches, it's true for countries. So that's why most of these things have all of these laws and things that are put in place to figure out, okay, when the pastor retires or he dies, then we form a committee. We talk to everyone at the church. We put together a questionnaire. What are we looking for in a new pastor? We'll contact all these different seminaries and Christian newspapers or websites, and we'll say, hey, we're looking for a pastor who looks like A, B, and C. Like, okay, so the point is there's a process, but the Muslims don't have a process. So the Arabic word for successor is Khalifa. Okay? Does this sound like any word that you know in English? Caliph. Okay? Caliph literally means successor. Who is supposed to be the successor of Muhammad? Well, then we enter into a period called the rightly guided Caliphs. And the Caliphs are the successors. But after these rightly guided Caliphs, you run into a big split in the Islamic Ummah community. The first one is Abu Bakr. This is the father of Aisha, Muhammad's child bride. And he is the caliph for 2 years. And as soon as Muhammad dies, a lot of these Arab groups that had become Muslims, guess what they do? They're like, okay, now that the guy is dead, we're going to go back to our paganism. We're going to go back to our polytheism. And then Abu Bakr, the first thing that he is responsible for upon becoming the successor of Muhammad is Harb al-Rida, which is Arabic for the wars of apostasy or the war of apostasy. These people have gone back to their traditional religions, and Abu Bakr has to make war against them. During this time of Abu Bakr, this brief 2-year caliphate, we have something called the Battle of Yamama. Yamama is a place, and this is where many, and by now the Quran is still not written down. The Quran has been memorized. Remember, these are cultures where people were used to memorizing large amounts of material. Unlike today, we're not used to memorizing hardly anything at all. But they were used to memorizing large amounts of material. And especially if it's a poem, if it's got that rhythm to it, it is easier to memorize. So the Quran was still being recited. But at the Battle of Yamama, a good number of the older Muslims who had been around for a long time and who had memorized much or all of the Quran, many of them died. So now on a pragmatic level, they're finding this obligation or this need to go ahead and come up with an official version of the Quran. The second caliph is named Uthman, and he reigned from 644 through 656. And this is when you have a guy named Zayd, and he is kind of put in charge of this project of figuring out what is the main body of the Quran, and let's go ahead and write this stuff down. There's a long, complex history of all these recensions and edits. We are not going to get into that. But the important thing is that by now you need to know that the Muslim community is aware, oh boy, we better write this stuff down, because a lot of the people who had memorized it, a lot of the original people have died or been killed in battle. The third caliph is Ali. And Ali is the son-in-law of Muhammad. Ali, well, Muhammad did not have any sons, because if he had had a son, then obviously his son would have been his successor. But he didn't have any sons who survived. He had a daughter named Fatima, and Ali is married to Fatima. So his son-in-law is going to become the third caliph. In 661, Ali is killed, and then the Umayyad Empire begin. So this is when you get to the Umayyads and the Abbasids and all these different caliphates. We're not going to go to that. This is viewed as the golden age of Islam, the period of the so-called Al-Khulafa al-Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs. Let me see what time it is. Okay, we're good. The rightly guided caliphs. For Muslims, this is a golden era. Back in the Protestant Reformation. Today we actually know a lot about church history. You know the church, when did we have our golden era? Never. We never had a golden era, right? I like asking people, who here, when you go to become a pastor, who wants to become the pastor of Corinth Christian Church? Like, who would want to actually be the pastor of that church in Corinth? Like, it's not a good church. It's not a healthy church, right? And the church in Rome has all these issues. The church in Jerusalem has issues. The church in Antioch, this Paul's sending church, they've got all these issues. So the point is, we never actually had a golden age in the Christian church. Although we tend to look back at the early centuries as being sort of a golden age. But that is, the church, I hope you've realized by now, has always had all sorts of different issues and problems. For Muslims, though, they're like, this is the period of pure, pristine Islam. And I remember talking with a young Muslim guy from Afghanistan. He's like, if we can go back to that period of Islam, when everything was pure and good, then that would be Islam shining. So it's kind of like communism, you know. Communism, if you talk to communists, they're like, yeah, communism, you know. Communism is really the solution for all the ills and the evils of capitalism today. And like, okay, well, show me where has communism functioned well. Did it function well in the Soviet Union? No, that was not real communism. Did it function well in East Germany? Well, no, that wasn't. Is it functioning well today in China? Well, no, that's not communism. How about North Korea? No, that's not. Okay, well, show me somewhere where it actually worked. And this is the question we have to ask to Muslims. Where has the Sharia actually led to a successful, healthy, positive society that lasted for a long time? And here's the main problem with the rightly guided caliphs. Of the 4 of them, 3 of them were assassinated. So I asked this young Muslim guy, I said, so do you think this is the example of like a successful way of governing? 4 of your ideal successors of Muhammad, 3 of them are assassinated? Does that seem like a healthy political system to you? And then he thought about it and he said, not really. Thinking. That's good. So anyway, we have done a quick sprint through the early history of Muhammad and then the rightly guided caliphs. And it is during this period that we're also going to have the conquest of many cities. Just so you can see, in the same way that Christianity grew very quickly, Islam grew very quickly. We'll talk about some of the political reasons for that after our break. But during the period when Omar was the caliph, he was the 3rd caliph, he is able to conquer Jerusalem, Alexandria, and Antioch, 3 of the 5 patriarchal sees that we talked about yesterday. 3 of the most important cities in the entire Christian world. And then later on, by the year 695, they're going to capture the city of Carthage, which is where our friends Tertullian and Perpetua and Felicity were, this great Christian center of northern Africa. And then by the year 711, they're going to, less than 100 years after the death of Muhammad, they're going to go into Iberia. And then finally, if you want another date, 762 is when they've gotten all the way into what is today Iraq. And the Muslim rulers, this is after the rightly guided caliphs, but this is when they start the city of Baghdad. Okay, so that is our brief history of Islam in a nutshell. This is a very brief nutshell. We could go into a lot of other details about this, but I just want you to go back and to remember that phrase from Kenneth Cragg. Muhammad, in expanding his empire, managed to start a religion. Islam sees no separation between state and religion, between the private and the communal, between the spiritual and the political. There is no separation. Islam is, and always has been, and always must be, if it's going to be Islam, deen wa dawla, a religion and a state. It is 2 sides of the same coin. You cannot remove either one of them.